55%. At this very moment, deep into the 21st century, just 55% of girls and women around the world are free to make decisions about their own bodies. How can we have equal rights when we don't have equal choices? Here to tackle that question head on is Deja Fox, an activist who uses the power of digital strategy to fight for reproductive rights. In conversation with Dr. Natalia Kanem, who helms the United Nations Population Fund with more than 30 years of strategic leadership experience in health and social justice.
Hi, Dr. Natalia. It is so wonderful to be in conversation with you today.
Hi, Deja. I'm excited to be here with you.
So we share a lot in common in terms of our goals, the work that we do, but I think everyone would love to hear a little bit about who you are and what brings you to this conversation today.
Well, you know what? I am the head of the UN Population Fund, UNFPA, and we are the proud inheritors of the mandate of Cairo ICPD, which says that sexual and reproductive health and rights are fundamental to women's rights and really to everybody's rights. In my own estimation, it's so important for every 10-year-old girl everywhere on the planet to have the confidence and the information that's going to be protective of her well-being, but more than that, allow her to really be able to spread her wings and fly. So I kind of feel like at this moment in history, I'm in the right place at the right time to help the United Nations and our agency really take a position that says my body is my own on bodily autonomy. And tell me what led you to where you sit today.
Yeah, I mean, hearing you talk about this vision of 10-year-old girls being able to realize their potential really speaks to why I'm here. I'm 21 years old. I'm an activist. I'm a strategist. I'm a content creator and a founder of a digital community called Gen Z Girl Gang. But what brings me to this conversation, to this moment, was really the way that I was brought into this world. I was raised by a single mom in a household like so many others that really struggled to cover the bare minimum, like rent and food. And when it came time for me to access birth control, I struggled to do so. And it brought me into the activist space, fighting for sex education and birth control access through the lens of my own personal experience. And so what brings me here today is sort of, I think, what brings you here as well, and that's protecting the potential of young people and creating communities that are defined by choice so they can really reach their full potential as well.
Well, you know, Deja, given the fact that there is so much taboo in even uttering some of the phrases which you just said a few minutes ago, young people, birth control, you know, the reality gets swept under the rug. There's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of blaming behavior. But are we really equipping young people with the life-saving information and tools that they need? Far less in countries where beyond taboo, it can actually be a crime to speak of certain issues. For my experience, and yes, I'm a doctor and I'm from Panama, had an immigrant experience here in the USA, but everywhere I go, the love and support of the family can be transformed into something that is far from protective. And for girls, the disadvantage is clear. So how do you think we're going to be able to burst that imaginary bubble that a girl is safe in ignorance when she's the one blamed, she's the one thrown out of school if she turns pregnant, apparently all by herself? You know what I mean? So how do you kind of reach across and have that dialogue?
Yeah, that is absolutely right. And you know, I am the first in my family to go on to college. And in large part, that is because of access to the reproductive health services I had in my teenage years, right? And so, you know, I sort of stand in my personal story, proof positive that when young women and girls have access to the care that they need to take control of their bodies, they can and will take control of their future. And so I think one thing that I sort of point to is that personal story. When I see young women and girls standing in their power, saying that my experience is my expertise, right? Coming to conversations like these, but not only on these grand scales, but within their communities, with their friends and their neighbors, and sharing what is safe, but maybe uncomfortable, and really pushing it forward through the lens of their own experience. I think there is so much power in that. And I want to encourage every young person to really use and lean on that experience as expertise. But I would love to ask from you to what is the role that you see as the power of narrative or storytelling in this work? How can people use their stories to make a difference?
Well, for me, there are probably a couple of very fundamentally important things, and that's there's a lot of pretense in the world that because someone is silent, that they're fine. But the power dynamic is skewed so that the young woman may not speak. Therefore, I think understanding full respect and for young people to actually demand their rights. This is how the Sustainable Development Goals are going to come to fruition, hopefully on time by 2030. We're also experiencing right now in real time a situation where we're redefining concepts like gender, for example. This can be very uncomfortable in certain societies, in certain schools, in certain locales, but it doesn't erase the fact that everyone has their own natural identity that they have every right to claim. So I think part of opening the dialogue is to make sure that we understand that by having a conversation, it doesn't necessarily mean you're trying to command agreement. What you're trying to do is to explore difference, which can be such a strength. And I think the last point is that we never back down when it comes to human rights. There is a big temptation sometimes to sweep things under the rug. Nobody likes to stick out and be the one pointed at. But I think it's been very heartening when we have young sports guys, for example, defend the rights of another. I think it's very inspiring to people to see that across generations, hopefully the older folks can listen and be led by people who, as you say, have the experience, have the passion, have the knowledge, and the willingness, because all of that has to come together into the package. I also think for those young women like yourself who are starting these new dialogues online, there can also be risk to that. But tell us how you find the courage to do this and how you deal with like negativism that you might encounter along the way, because I think that can scare people off from wanting to try.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I got a piece of advice in the eighth grade that has always stuck with me, and that is that other people's opinion of me is simply none of my business. Um, um, I sort of hold that to be true when I craft my personal story. I remind myself that this is my story and mine alone, and only I can tell it, uh, and that nobody can tell it like me. Right? That there are people with more experience, better degrees, titles, but that nobody will ever hold the experience that you do. And so this is sort of the message that I share with young people wherever I go. That you don't have to have all of those fancy things to be an expert in your own experience. And when you stand in that expertise and you share what is uncomfortable but not unsafe, and you do it authentically and wholeheartedly, you can really create some substantial change. And, I think something that has really given me the courage to do that, especially online, in an environment where you really can't predict the outcome. I've had a few viral videos that I didn't expect. Having that community, particularly other young women and femmes who surround and support me personally and professionally. And so we really cannot overstate the value of community in this work. And so,
Brilliant,
yeah, thank
brilliant,
you. I
brilliant, brilliant.
appreciate.
And, I think those are very wise words that you're sharing, that you've carried since 8th grade. And I'm going to remember that myself. One of
I
the reasons,
I wanted to circle back to something that you said earlier. You used the word redefine when you were talking about my generation, particularly as we relate to gender. And I would love to ask you, as we sort of redefine so many of the things in this world, right? As this generation comes in and creates so many new frameworks, what is the vision that you have for this world
well,
in this work?
it's a great question, and I'd love for you to answer as well the
A
exact
reverse.
same thing. For me, the exercise is one of reimagining a world where women and girls are fully respected. We are familiar with this horrible statistic of 1 in 3 women and girls who are going to be affected by violence in their lifetime. That doesn't need 200 years to change. That doesn't need 50 years to change. All of that has to change by tomorrow. So, wise words that I reflect on from Frederick Douglass: power concedes nothing without a demand. So, when women and girls stand up and demand our full rights, we expect allies from all across the spectrum, and in particular, men who hold power, to change that uh, impossible to change statistic overnight, not in 25 or 30 years. So back to you, Deja.
Yes, this call for urgency, sort of circling back to where we started this conversation. When I think about 10-year-old Deja or 15-year-old Deja, my younger self, I think about the immediacy of protecting my potential, right? That it couldn't wait until tomorrow for me to access the care that I needed. And if it had, I may not be sitting in the classroom that I'm sitting in now. I may not be occupying positions of power as a strategist on a presidential campaign at just 19 years old. And I think when we look at people like me, right, there's definitely a sense of exceptionalism, but I also hope that we can see that there is unlimited potential in these young women and girls and that it cannot wait to be protected. And that you're absolutely right. We have to call on our allies, the people who hold power, and hold them accountable to this, while also realizing that young people and the people most affected should be at the forefront of these movements, right? Not just as implementers, but as strategists and as leaders and board members. And so I guess my other call to action as we close out really is to those people who hold power. And that's to make space for young people and their voices and their experiences and their leadership.
Wonderful. Agree completely. And thank you for sharing some of your journey. I think it's really important for us to speak out and be vocal and visible on these issues. So thank you, Deja.
Thank you. And thank you for the very important work that you do and being such a powerful role model for women and girls around the world
Thanks very much.
as well.